Yeah, okay. So now's probably as good a time as any to explain who I am and what I'm going to try and do in this talk. So my name's Andy Hibbard. Um, like to think of myself as a person-centered practitioner, working as probably as purely as I can. That's my goal. Um, and I've been to a few talks recently where in workshops, and I kept interrupting those workshops because I kept hearing examples of people saying they were being congruent, and what that seemed to mean was that they were sharing something of themselves with their clients. And I think that's a misunderstanding of congruence within person-centered theory. So I've put together some writing, and hopefully then I don't have to keep interrupting people's workshops, but who knows. Does that make sense, Jinyu? Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were eating.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, and Amalia, welcome. Hi. So I have written some things, and they're on my phone. So I'm gonna go through it. But because of the size, I think we could probably get a good discussion going as well. Don't know how it's going to work with you guys in the group room, but I'm interested to see how that works. I've never done it where we've got a whole group on one screen. So, so yeah, I've explained why I'm doing it. And I think the first thing I'd like to do... you okay? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I want to define congruence because I think this is one of the issues, is that especially in the original writings, when we look at Rogers, he seems to move between what congruence actually is in a few times. So I think there's some potential for misunderstanding there. So I'm going to give my definition, and it might be overly simplistic. You know, that could be a criticism of what I'm going to say, but I'm going to try this. So there's two parts as I understand it. There's an internal congruence, and that means me knowing what happens within myself. I might be knowing my thoughts and feelings. And what that's based on is the idea that I don't know everything that's going on in myself. But that in therapy, as a therapist, it's probably a good idea for me to be as congruent as possible. And I say as possible because I don't think it's an absolute. You know, I might be as congruent as possible today, and then in a week's time, everything's shifted, right? So I think that requires constant work. You don't just get to a point and go, well, I'm congruent now, that's me done. So that's the first part, that's an internal one. I use the example of if you're a bag of 100 marbles, then congruence is knowing all 100 marbles. You know, then you get to say, oh, I'm congruent. The issue with that example is that in the theory, you wouldn't know that there's 100 marbles to know. That gets a bit more complicated later on. The second part to the definition is relational congruence. This to me is the more important part when it comes to practice and discussion of theory in the room, because I believe the only relational definition of congruence is that the client experiences my offering of the conditions as genuine. That's it. I'm really quite strict on that. So that cuts out a lot of stuff where it might seem like someone's being congruent because what they're saying is genuine or something like that. But I don't think that has a place within the theory. And what I mean with the relational one is that my offering is genuine, and I'm not pretending to accept them. So that's my definition. That's probably as simple as I can say it. Does anyone want any clarification on what I've said so far? Am I okay to carry on?
What is the first part of the congruence?
So I said that the first part of my definition is an internal congruence, and that's knowing myself.
When you say
Yep.
when you say relational, is it related to the process or related to the clinician or the therapist? In relation to the therapist, or it is in relation to the process?
When I say relational, I am meaning relational between me and my client.
Okay.
Thanks for asking that. Please do continue to ask and clarify. Okay, I'll assume there's no more questions on those bits. I'm going to move on to what I've titled concerns. And this is where I get to be quite negative. I don't really like this bit, but I think it's important to talk about. Okay, so one of my concerns is that congruence is misinterpreted as self-disclosure. So that's where people, like, let's say I'm sitting with a client, I feel angry about something, I don't know, and I choose to bring that into the interaction with the client. To me, that's a self-disclosure. That's bringing something within myself to the client, and it doesn't fit within the definition of congruence as I would want to define it. So the first...
ask something?
Yes, please do.
Does this anger have anything to do with the client, or is it something else that brought it up?
So I made up. It's
for
not.
Me, it slightly differentiates things. Maybe.
Okay. It was an offhand. It's not a real example, so I can't really say. It would be my own stuff, because I believe if I have the conditions for the client, it seems almost impossible that anger would come up.
I meant, for example, what if the client brings something up that I realize makes me angry?
Yeah. So angry from your...
It either has to do with our relationship or with something he brings up that makes me feel angry. And it's related to how I think, what my beliefs are, and so...
Yeah, so I think because it's related to how you think and what your beliefs are, then it's coming from your frame of reference. My position is that in person-centered work, we need to put that aside when we're working with the client and be fully in their frame of reference.
Okay. Even though it might have something to do with my relationship with the client.
So I don't really know.
Hey, I think you're so ugly today, for example. I don't know, just an example.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what the purpose then would be of trying to bring that in with the client. If my goal is to offer the conditions with them, then I'm wanting to stay in line with them. I think if they said a comment like that to me, I might feel angry, it might bring up something in me, but I'd be unlikely to bring that back to the client as me.
But you'd still feel like you would be congruent towards the client.
Can you say that bit again with some more words?
Yeah, meaning that in the example I gave, the client says, okay, today you're so ugly. So it makes me feel angry. However, I choose not to bring it up. So would I still, as you think, be congruent with myself and towards the client?
I think so. You know that the anger is yours. So that's part one of my definition of congruence. So I'd be sitting there saying, well, I know now that I'm feeling angry because of what that client's told me. I think that's the limit of the congruence for me. There'd be no benefit or purpose to then bringing that into the relationship.
Even though it is initiated from something the client told me and it has to do with our own relationship.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's what I would want to ask you, Amalia, is what's your intention if you were to bring that to the client? Are you thinking about the conditions? Do you experience them with the client as you're saying that to them? and also what the aim of saying that would be.
What the aim? I'm not quite sure if there would be an aim per se, but given the fact that it's something that has come up in here and now, and it has to do with my relationship with the client, I'm thinking that it might be fit to try to express how I feel with the client's comment. It
Okay.
might not, but I mean, it's not like it's out of the question not to bring it up at all.
Okay. I think probably for me it would be out of the question. I'm not sure how it would fit within person-centered theory. I talked to my girlfriend before doing this talk, and I was trying to explain to her, she's not a therapist, I was explaining to her what congruence was, and I was saying, because some therapists will bring things in about how they feel with the client, and quote, she said, I don't give a shit how my therapist feels. It's a fun joke, but it's kind of like, yeah, isn't it? We're here for them. Why do they care how I feel? They might, but I think I'd only tell them if they asked.
Well, I guess that's where I sort of disagree with you. I'm there for them, but I'm there too.
Yeah,
I mean,
so I think...
I can't just ignore.
So I think, Amalia, theoretically, I'm going to disagree with you. I think theoretically, person-centered doesn't require me to self-disclose how I feel with my client.
Yeah, not necessarily, but not putting it totally out of the question there.
For me, it would be out of the question.
Okay, I get what you say.
I'm worried we're going to get too hung up, but we could hash this out either at the end of my chat or in a dialogue on email or something, if you'd like to. So I'm going to carry on with some of the other concerns. So, this is a bit of a bugbear of mine. That one of my concerns is that it's a separation of the conditions. So I believe the conditions are really one thing. They're one offering. If you wanted to call it something, you could call it love. But it's not like a romantic love. It's more like spiritual love. So my goal is to love my client. My goal isn't to be simply empathic or simply UPR or simply congruent with my client. Because actually I don't believe you can be just congruent with your client. Theoretically, that doesn't make sense how I've understood it. What that means is the core conditions are inseparable. We can talk about them as separate things, and we can define them, and that seems important. But in the room, in the work, they combine to create something slightly more than the separate bits. And that's the magic of the work, I believe. There's something that transcends the scientific definition of the conditions. So yeah, my concern with that is that people would latch on to congruence and say, well, I'm just doing that. And I think that's a mistake. I don't think we should be just doing any of the conditions separately. The other concern I have is that it's used as an intervention to create an effect. So I suppose I'm mainly pointing my finger at what is called relational depth. It's become quite popular in some areas. Mick Cooper is championing it. And one of the ideas in that is that relational depth is the level at which therapy happens, so that often they'll aim for that contact and relational with the client. And one of the ways to do that is by being real with the client. I think it's another mistake. I don't have that aim. I don't think person-centered theory has an aim to get to that with the client. Relational depth happens. It's incidental. It's not a purpose of the therapy. And I think my last concern is that it's used as proof of being real in the relationship. I hear this a lot. People are concerned that they don't want to just be a blank screen. They want to be themselves with their client. And I get that, because part of a lot of this journey is, I get to know myself. I'm going through therapy. I'm offering therapy. I want to be a real person with this other real person. And what they then say is, well, then I'm allowed to be congruent with them. I'm allowed to say these things. I think it's another mistake. I think we should be stricter on how much of ourselves we bring. But again, this might be seen as a personal stance. I'm not sure it is. I think theoretically, there's not real much need for me to tell the client about myself in person-centered work. That's my end of my concerns. Are there any other questions or anything about those?
I have concerns about your concerns, but I don't know if you want to go into it. 30 years of doing client-centered, but within a structure, VA, for veterans. You have to be very careful with self-disclosure, but it's not just telling how you feel. If you share an experience, the client can then know you better understand than they think you understand. When they look at me, and I've not been in combat, but I can share with them things that I experienced working in an emergency room. When we talk about smells and triggers and things like that, they feel more understood. I totally agree with you. We have to be very careful with self-disclosure and sharing, and we have to make sure we're doing it to enhance the relationship and not because we have a need in that moment. But philosophically, I disagree with you, and I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah. And it's Pat?
Yes.
Thank you, Pat, for saying this. So it's going to sound strange to say my talk is a bit paradoxical because I'm going to say all of these concerns and then also say you might get to the point in your ability to practice person-centered that you can do all of these things I'm concerned about, and it is still person-centered work. So that's the paradoxical aspect of my talk. To do this full circle, what I'm saying is when you're beginning this work, and I've been doing it for 2 or 3 years person-centered and more years in different therapy, I think when you're beginning this work, you shouldn't be given examples and guidance to work in that final way. Does that make sense, Pat? I see you're nodding your head.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that. Well, and when things aren't going well with a client, I go back to the basics and get more rigid in the conditions and structure just because things aren't going well. So I believe in the process and I go back to the process. So I agree with you too, but I guess I didn't catch the part for when you're dealing with beginning folks to give them, context to work in. That I don't disagree with.
Okay, yeah, I have an example later on then that might put your mind at ease. It's almost the last thing I say, so you're going to have to hold on to your dis-ease for a bit. I'm going to move on. Tanya has joined. No sound, no video. Just letting you know that I know you're here, Tanya.
Thank you. I am here. I can hear you, and I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you. I'm about 1/3 of the way through my talk. There are times for questions, so when that comes around again, if you're confused at all about what's happening, let me know. So, I've kind of done this. I'm now going to move on to my beliefs. This is going to be quite brief, I think. So I've talked about congruence as being interwoven into the other conditions, and I came up with a metaphor. So my metaphor is to do with a cake. And in therapy, let's say I'm offering the client cake. This is a metaphor, guys. I'm not giving them cake. And that cake is made up of the core conditions, so egg, flour, water. I think that's what goes into it. I've never made a cake. Roughly speaking, I think that's what a cake is about. And my concern is that a therapist might sit there, think they're doing person-centered work, but all they're doing is handing the client an egg, and they're thinking it's cake. And the client's like, no, I'm here for the cake. So what I'm saying with that is, again, my earlier point of the conditions make more than, I don't know, the greater than the sum of the parts, and they have to be together as one thing, which is like a, I run out of words when I talk about it, so I'm just going to move on to the next bit. my other belief is that self-disclosure is not required to satisfy the sixth condition. And I think before doing this talk, I kept thinking, why am I doing this talk? Who's it for? Is it just for me to what I think about the conditions and congruence? And no, because I think I'll do a bit of a political speech now. What I see and that concerns me is new trainees coming through and they've been mistaught or misunderstood the theory, and it's been reinforced, and then it's like a year or two down the line, I meet them and there's clearly a misunderstanding, or my belief, a misunderstanding of the theory. So for me, this is a bit about a back to basics clarity and an importance in that, to say we should all be starting from the same place. I feel really passionate about that. It frustrates me when I hear some stories. That's my political thing. So yeah, self-disclosure is not required to satisfy the sixth condition. I'm assuming everyone knows the sixth, just for reminders. The sixth is about the client receives it, the client gets it, right? The official sixth is the client perceives to a minimal degree the acceptance and empathy which the therapist experiences for him. Okay? If the sixth doesn't happen, well, therapy doesn't happen. I can be really empathic and all the rest of it, and if the client doesn't experience that and doesn't receive it, then therapy is not happening. I mean, maybe philosophically that we could disagree on that as well. It gets complicated. But my belief is that self-disclosure is not required to satisfy the sixth condition. So then it comes back to the next question of why would you want to do it? And you might have good reasons for it, but I'm thinking that theoretically it wouldn't fit within person-centered theory. Okay. The other thing I was worried about was that sharing is at best irrelevant and at worst harmful. And the concern is if we tell particularly students during courses that self-disclosure is a part of the work as a requirement for person-centered therapy, like it's one of the necessary conditions, then they're going to try to do that. They're going to be looking for reasons to do that with the client, and I think that's a mistake. I'm also saying that might happen in advanced work, but I'm saying from the beginning it shouldn't be encouraged, because I think it's so easy to get wrong. I think it's wrong anyway, but I don't want to rant too much. Okay, this one's going to be quite hard to explain. I will try my best. Within therapy, I know that I am incongruent when I lose the conditions for the client. Okay, that's my belief. So if you think of it like a radio frequency, you know, when you move a radio, do people listen to the radios anymore? It's like it goes, and and it woo, and then it's clear. Well, I have this thing when I'm working with a client, when it's clear and I'm on the mark and I'm with them, I know I'm with them, right? I can sense that on some level. My belief is that when I lose that, when static comes up, that's when I'm incongruent. And that comes back to the second part of my definition, where I'm saying congruence is a genuine experiencing of the conditions to the client. So as a practitioner, that's really important for me to be aware of, is to say, okay, have I slipped from the conditions? Do I not feel love with this client? And if I'm slipping, my only job is to get back on track. And what I saw happen on my course and in other courses, I'm getting muddled with my words. People would lose that, so they would get static, they'd go off track, and then they would be encouraged to bring that into the therapy. I think that's a mistake. It doesn't need to be done. All that needs to be done is for me to get back to loving that person I'm sitting with, park my own stuff, deal with it later, talk about it with someone. that's quite simplistic. It's not always that simple, but that's going to be my first go-to when I'm working with a client. So if I'm disinterested or bored with the client, my first port of call is to say, well, something's going on with me, and I need to sort that out and get back to empathizing and accepting my client. So that's internal investigation rather than raising it with the client. Any questions at this point? Jinyi, you look like a question is brewing. Maybe not. No questions? Okay. Fine. I'm almost done. It's only half an hour. This is a short one. Easy morning for you guys.
It really sounds like you're pushing back against your training or the environment of, because I think what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense. If people are given wrong information as this is person-centered, we have, but when I've been retired a couple of years, but there was a time when a lot of person-centered terms were usurped but misused and applied to other therapies, and then they said, well, this is person-centered, when it wasn't, it was directive. And it seems like your situation where you're at is they're confusing self-disclosure with authenticity and other things, and it's for you, and I think you're correct, most of the time it's contaminating the relationship or the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why that would not set well with you.
Yes, thank you, Pat. I completely agree with what you've said. It's the big driving force with wanting to put this talk together and potentially write an article as well about it. My sort of sense of hopelessness is that it probably won't change what's happening in those institutions where that training takes place, and that frustrates me no end, because I really do believe this work is precious, but it's delicate as well, and the flame is dwindling as the terms get bastardized and the therapy gets diluted, and everyone gets together, pats themselves on the back and says they're person-centered, and then goes off and does all sorts of stuff that to my mind isn't.
Right. Yeah, that they're meeting their own needs in therapy.
I think that happens, but also I think there's a lack of rigor and discipline and to really looking into what's going on in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I could easily say, hey, Pat, I'm the best therapist in the world. You're not going to know because you're not my client sitting in the room with me.
Right. Well, and you're the best for a handful of people, but not for everybody. But yeah, no, I think, this is important to address. I agree with you, and I would understand your push for doing this presentation and do write the article.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I think when I first drafted it to, I've forgotten her name.
Amanda?
Yeah, Amanda Goldman, is it? And I said I didn't want to just be preaching to the choir. I don't want to do this talk if everyone's just going to sit around and go, yeah, great. But then I was like, well, what am I trying to do with it? I'm not sure. Because I also didn't want to come across as some like Hitler-esque, like this is the way that has to be done. Like, there's that other concern, because I had this when I was coming through training, that the way I put it sounds restrictive, and I don't like being restricted. And there's something about what I'm saying here that says, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't say that. And I am saying that. And no one likes to be told they can't do something.
Right. Well, I think oftentimes, and I supervised clinicians for a lot of years, that self-disclosure thing, it takes a lot of discipline and is tricky. And you need to be looking very closely at how the client responds when you either ask, are you interested in hearing something about me or whatever. And it's not treated with such care, because it really, I mean, it can be an empathetic breach very easily, putting your own stuff on the table. So I agree with the caution around that. And people are different. Some folks aren't comfortable until they know some things about you. And other folks, you just watch them, like, wait for you to finish so they can continue with what they're saying. You know, it's a mix. We're in relationship with people, and so it's not just one size fits all.
I think you come on to an important point that's, I think, quite an advanced point, Pat, that what I'm talking about here is kind of a beginner's default, and it's a minimum standards. But as you go through your work, you're going to learn that there's times when you can go, okay, I know normally I work like this, but with this person I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
My concern is that, go on.
To your point, you have to get the basics first. If you don't get the basics in a solid way, you don't have what to go back to.
Yeah, and you don't know when you're straying from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just going to wrap up my last few points, and then we can, well, you can either leave and, I don't know, go and walk around, or we can talk more as a group. I don't know. Haven't thought about it that far. So I've got 2 examples to think about. I've not concluded on these. Let's say, hang on. Let's say I'm working with a client and they say something and it's so moving, I start crying. Is it congruence? Is it self-disclosure? I've not got a final answer on this. There's no like.
Or the clients.
Say it again, Ginny.
I don't know if it's you said you start to cry or the client start to cry.
So I am working with a client and they share a story and I am so moved that I start crying.
Okay, I got it.
I'm okay to do that in my work. I think it's okay to do, but I could understand why someone might say, well, maybe you crying is influencing or affecting the client's process. It's possible. I don't know. I'm trying to play devil's advocate to myself, but I think I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, I'm okay with it too.
Okay. I just want to check, because I haven't heard anything from the group room, because you're on mute. Just want to check everyone's still alive. I know they've not unmuted, so I don't know. Are you guys okay in the group? Can't hear anything.
I was just asking everybody if they had a strong desire to be unmuted. But I'll unmute us if I remember that.
I was just saying, if I do shed a tear during a session, I really try not to bring too much attention to it.
Oh, nice.
You know, because it's not about me, but I am a sympathetic crier and I can't stop that. I can't turn that off. So I might just kind of like wipe my eye a little bit, you know, not try to be like bawling and get up and get Kleenex and make it like a whole thing. But I kind of feel like that's something kind of like facial expressions that I don't have a lot of control over. I don't have a good poker face, and I can be a sympathetic crier. Not all the time, but when something really hits me. So
yeah,
I've always thought, well, it must be congruent because that's just how I feel right now. But I could be wrong.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to say, this is Tanya. So I'm trying to start my work computer so I can be heard better and seen. So I will join in different identities soon.
Okay.
So and then I can participate better.
Okay.
Because I don't feel comfortable when you can't see me, and probably quality of sound is not.
We can hear you
it's
fine.
very clear. I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll try. If it doesn't work, I'll just be blank screen.
Okay. My other example may be a bit trickier. I wonder what you guys think of this. A client tells me a sad story, but they are smiling as they tell what is a sad story, and I'm not going to smile back to them. That's my position on it. Sometimes I feel it, like I feel that pull to be like, yeah, but inside it's like,
I have a client who would do like a 30-minute comedy routine if I allowed that to happen during session. Like she would just fire off joke after joke after joke, and just trying to understand the gravity behind the jokey story that she's telling. It's sometimes difficult to not participate in that and have a nice laugh with her about it, because that is also how I deal with hard things, is with laughter.
So to check what's happening there, she would spend a long time of the session joking about stuff that is actually quite serious.
Correct. Yes, like she would treat therapy like a comedy, like she would be on stage for an hour.
Was it funny?
Yes, very funny.
Okay.
Like she's very humorous.
Yeah.
But what's underneath
the darkness behind the story is not right.
It's very serious.
She's a very dark humor person.
I mean, a lot of thoughts are shooting off. Part of me is thinking, well, if someone is presenting that way and that is who they are, maybe I do accept that and go with it. But it would have to be my sense of what's happening in the room. If they want the therapy to be them joking, and it's really important that you see and hear that part, I don't know. I like that as an example, and I think it's a bit different to my one, because it sounds like that's her whole presentation.
Yes, it's hard to get underneath that, the joking and the laughing.
So my first thing would be like, often there's an idea that we want to be getting underneath stuff in therapy. For me, in person-centered work, I'm only going to be dealing with what's right in front of me.
I have something to say. I have to say before that, because I'm from China and my English listening and speaking is not very well. So, and I'll try my best to express what I want to say. I just got some feeling of not very well when you share. I didn't remember when I start to have these feelings, and now when I want to speak, I find that it's like a feeling of I'm kind of being pushed by this talk or by you. I'm not sure. I just feel that maybe in the inner process of what you really want to share and what you do in the therapy, and you share it with me. Like I just feel that you are doing a little hard to yourself, and yeah, and I feel that, and the other part is I'm not very well. Oh, it's so hard to use English for me. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think I understand a bit of what you've said, Ginny, and I'll try and say it back and you can tell me if it is what you were saying.
Okay.
I think you said that I am hard on myself.
I'm not sure if there is like a little, a very, or something. Just a little hard, or more than a little, but not very.
Okay, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. I take my work, I think this is what you're talking about. I take my work very seriously, and I'm very strict on how I want to do this work because I've experienced how good it can be. And when I started, I had a bit of what felt like, I can do whatever and I can call it person-centered because I've read Carl Rogers, I know what he's talking about, and I can just turn up and be myself, and that's what person-centered therapy is about. I no longer have that position. I have much more discipline over my work, and I am strict on how I do this work.
So how you change your position from the beginning to now?
Yeah. You asking why I changed?
How you changed? What happened?
What happened? Yeah, I went to see a therapist, and I experienced a type of therapy which I now would call person-centered therapy. Up until that point, I had been on a course and I had had supervisors and therapists, and I'd never experienced it in this way. So this woman was a big inspiration to me, and I've then since then kind of dedicated myself, and it wasn't you know when you go to a cult and it's like, oh, this is amazing, like, oh, and you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and it wasn't like that. I was really skeptical at first because I knew the way she worked, and I said, I'm not sure I want to do that. So what I said to myself was that I will experiment with it. I will try being this way for maybe a year's worth of private practice. So I did put on that discipline for that year. And I said, I'm only going to work in this way and I'm going to see what happens. And I'm very happy with the results, so I continue to work in that way.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I think I've got one last example. Have I said this one? Oh no, I've said that example. I've got an exception. It's more of a fun thing. It's not really... We're getting to the more like the back end of the talk now. I have worked in 4 schools. So go on, Ginny, you had something else?
Well, I still have something to share. Like when I was new in this area. Like I'm connect with the Chinese PCA circle.
Yeah.
About 1 year, and it's like a process. Like I can find myself more. I can be myself more, like be me in the session.
Mm-hmm.
Gradually.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read the PCA in Action, that book, and I read a sentence like, if you you as a therapy, if you not receive enough unconditional unconditional regard, positive regard, and you can not offer this to yourself, and you cannot offer this to your client. So I came to see a PCA therapist, and also I see my supervision uh, uh like one week, once a week, and it's a long way, and I just feel that I used to be more strict to myself, but now I'm more generous or gentle to myself. Yeah, that's what happened to me. I just want to share this with you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jinya. It sounds like a really nice development through your work. So the last bit, I've got two last bits. This bit's titled Exceptions, but there's only really one exception. I've worked in 4 schools. I've worked with a lot of teenagers. I go down as young as like 5 up to 18. And with them, I will often self-disclose. I do this as part of the work. And for me, it does have an agenda. It does have an aim and an intention. And my aim is to show that the relationship I have with this young person isn't going to be like the other relationships they have with other adults in the school and in life generally. So there is a purpose to it. It's not quite a normalizing of the relationship, but to say that I'm not going to be another adult here that holds power over you or has an expert position to you. And self-disclosure for me forms an important part of that. It doesn't mean I run in and start the session by telling them how I got there. But it's more about being okay with saying, oh, this and that, this weekend, blah, blah, blah. It's a normalizing thing, which I do much more with young people. I don't think I really do it with adults. And that is an exception for me. And often it's just an on-ramp to therapy with them anyway. Like once they get into the groove of therapy, I don't do it anymore. I think I've got 2 takeaway points. I'm not sure where I wrote those. I've said this shouldn't be seen as final or prescriptive. The word prescriptive for me is important because in person-centered work, it's like the theory is over here, and that can be really concise and simple, and then the practice is over here. And I think so much needs to be done to get that simplicity and purity over to the practice, because it's easy to talk about the theory and go, well, yeah, empathy, and then be sitting in the room with someone and just be like, oh, I don't even like this person. It's like the work is this bit. Don't spend too long going, congruence. I know I've done a whole talk on it, but the work is over here with people. That's what we're doing, right? We don't. Or maybe some of you do want to be theorists. Nothing wrong with that. I think I'm a bit of a theorist myself. But ultimately, we're trying to help people. So this is about refining practice. So you might be shit hot on the theory. Then good. That means you can be shit hot in the practice as well, hopefully. And I think my message with that is be okay with getting it wrong as well. I started this whole thing with very little empathy. That's been a big one for me to learn through my supervisor. And my empathy is mainly cognitive empathy at the moment, and that's something I'm developing on. I think it's important for us to know our strengths and weaknesses in the work, to know what we can deliver, who we can match with, and what we can improve or change, or know that, oh, well, that's my limitation, maybe. Basically, don't worry about getting things wrong, or like making mistakes. But also don't be like, oh, it's fine to make mistakes, YOLO, and go in and telling your client about your own weekend. There's somewhere in the middle of that. Is that the end of it? Have I written anything else? Oh yeah, congruence requires continual work and refinement. That's more to do with the first one, internal. There's an easy thing that happens. I notice this in myself. After a bit of work, I get quite confident in how I'm working, and it's very easy to let things slip in this work, I think, and to fool myself and go, yeah, another good session, easy, good one. It's really hard to get accurate feedback. So I think my approach is to try and continually refine it as much as I can in my own way.
Andy, when you believe that you've made a mistake in a session, do you address it with the client?
Usually I don't know it's a mistake in the session. That's doubly embarrassing, Pat.
Well, there's always the next session. I
Hopefully.
Said to people after thinking about our last encounter, I'd like to bring this up again. I mean, because we're forgiven a lot of mistakes. That's why attending to the relationship is so important, because the strength of the relationship can often carry our not so good days, or when we're distracted, or when something else is going on. And I was just curious if you sometimes bring that up with the client.
So, Pat, what you've talked about there is another reason why I think I've become even stricter in the way I work. I would aim for over 90, maybe even 95% of my communication to just be empathic responses for that reason. Because I think it's too easy to make a mistake and there's not any need for it. So my aim with my communication is to let the client know I'm with them. That's my main aim.
If your reflection totally doesn't resonate with the client, is that a mistake, or is it just like, oh, okay, well, I don't have a say more? And for
me, if I miss my client, no, a mistake for me is when something goes a bit worse than that. I would call if I say something and it doesn't land with my client, most of them correct me, some of them ignore me and just move on.
But that's not a mistake. That's the process of...
Yeah. And actually, with some clients, they're at a place where you can't get them. So not getting them is an essential part of the process, because they're not getting themselves. So you're meeting them in that not getting bit.
Right. Yes.
No. Go on.
I wanted to say, for me, mistake usually not in empathic level of empathic response, because I always try my best but not always get, and it maybe not always my fault, maybe just not developed, the thought is not developed enough to be reflected, whatever. For me, a mistake would be more like incongruence, more like speaking, maybe it's not even congruence, it's speaking from my frame of reference, allowing myself to be too free with it. Like, this is the mistake which if I am sick, or if I am tired, or if I am too relaxed and not disciplined enough, I may make this mistake, and sometimes I need to fix it next session. Sometimes I just get myself back under control and concentrate harder and finish the session more disciplined and to prevent any harm possible. Or I have to come next session and say, by the way, I'm sorry, last time I was not maybe fully present or whatever it happened, and I was wrong. And usually just the patient, I work in hospital, so this is why patient. So the patient usually just moves on, they have their own agenda, not talking about how I feel about it.
Yeah. And that's an important thing, isn't it? Because, I mean, I've seen examples of other therapies where they might spend a whole session just talking about that. And it's like, come on, that's not what they're paying for. I'm glad you raised that, because you made the separation between self-disclosure and congruence. And I do think they are two separate things. And I think they're too muddled in recent times. I think because you missed quite a lot of the early stuff. That's what I was saying in the early part of the talk.
Yep. I don't know if I was waiting when you opened for questions. I have one question, but I'll wait.
No, you please go. This is the time. We're pretty much at the end.
Okay. So first of all, again, I missed the beginning, but from what I got after I came, I understood what we actually. I agree with you on your view of congruence and on the importance of not putting self-disclosure on pedestal. To begin with, person-centered therapy is not instrumental.
Yeah.
So when the self-disclosure becomes instrumental, and it's already against what we're talking about here. So, I mean, or opposite, or is not what we're talking about here. And but I had a question about your second point, which I was present already at. I'm just interested. Maybe I didn't understand. Maybe it just needs a little bit more clarification for me. So you said, if I am not mistaken, you said what if you don't have that, for me I call it aha moment, that connection with the patient in the moment, or client, sorry, then this is for you when you're not congruent. Correct?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
go on.
So for me, this is, and I don't want to argue who is right or who is wrong, but I want to maybe offer how I see it. So what you're saying is, because for me, definition of congruence, as I see it in papers, in Rogers, for example, is when my external view of self and how I act or feel or perceive myself, my behavior, in the moment doesn't match. So this is the state of congruence, is when who I am, how I see myself, how my concept of self and how I want to be is congruent or equal to how I am able to behave. So when conditions of worth do not prevent me anymore from expressing my true self. So this is how I see what Rogers talks about congruence, and it's actually what is it? The highly developed person, whatever, I don't remember the term for it, the end stage of development, kind of what we strive for, when our true potential is not prevented from being expressed. So what you describe when you talk about congruence of therapist and yourself as therapist is you see yourself as somebody who has to and able to provide those conditions and be attuned. And when you're not attuned, you're not congruent.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think so. Maybe the terms isn't useful. So I do have two definitions of congruence, and that's the bit you missed at the start. So the first definition is an internal congruence. Do I know what's happening within myself? And the second is a relational one, but it is definitely within the confines of person-centered therapy. And within those confines, I'm saying I want to congruently offer the conditions.
And it's whereas in my world, whereas two things, whereas intention, something we strive for ideal 100% presence and pure perception and pure reflection, being pure 100%. But this is what we strive for. This is where our intention is when we enter that therapy. And this is why we take good care of ourselves, so we can provide it. But we're not always capable of, because we're human beings. So I think that's it. Sorry, I don't know if I'm making any point here.
Let me try and say something and see if this helps.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an absolute.
Mm-hmm.
I can't be fully congruent.
Yeah. Yes.
But I do know
Yep.
when I lose connection with my clients,
Mm-hmm.
and when I lose the empathic connection, or if I stop accepting them, if something they say really bugs me and I can't shake it, I know when I lose that. I might not know why I lose it, but I know it's gone. And for me, that's the important bit where I say, okay, so now I'm incongruent. Something's going on within me that I'm not aware of. I've lost connection with the client. And I think when therapy's happening in that moment, my only job is to get back on track with the client. And then later on I go, why did I lose it? What was going on for me? And maybe I can find out. Maybe I can't. I don't know.
So can you, sorry, I sometimes use profanities in my speech. Can you screw up congruently? I mean, can you make mistake congruently?
So it's tricky now because congruent has a definition in normal language as well. But I'm trying as much as possible to keep the definition narrow and within person-centered therapy. So when you say to screw up congruently, I don't really know how that sentence can be formed within the definition of my definition of congruence.
So your definition of congruency is 100% present of conditions? So it will stop being conditioned then?
The second one, the second part of my definition, relational congruence, is that the client experiences me offering them the conditions genuinely. They don't they don't say, Andy's just pretending to accept me. They experience it and they say, I feel it's real. And for me, that's the relational congruence.
You know, sorry, maybe I sound like I'm arguing with you, but I actually am having fun of bouncing it with somebody who been thinking about it for a long time. So I hope it's okay. So when I'm thinking about me making mistakes in the sessions, not very often, but it happens. How I make okay with it? Number one, I say, well, here we go again. Try harder, be more disciplined. Don't relax when, don't allow yourself to, discipline. Then additional, I'm saying, well, my patients are humans, and so often they held it at the standards where they have to be perfect. And when I'm not perfect, it makes it okay for them to be imperfect too. So it's two vulnerable human beings making, for me, what therapy is two imperfect human beings coming together and trying to make it work. This one of them, me, having a responsibility to make it, taking the responsibility for that relationship on, and make it safe, to create a space where no harm is the priority. So for me, what I mean in relational terms, it kind of normalizes it. Again, I wouldn't say it's supposed to be norm. It normalizes it, meaning it allows me to forgive myself, because it hurts when you screw up. It hurts so badly, because when you hurt for yourself and when you hurt for the other who you take responsibility for. And
I think I get some of that. I also don't feel like you're arguing with me. I'm happy to keep talking about it in this way. Sometimes I'll say something and it's not only off the mark, it's like in the next postcode, it's really far away, and they'll correct me and I'll say, like, my bad, my mistake. I think it's okay to be clear and open with the client when we lose conditions and when we can't hold them. Like if a client really goes far someplace and in that moment in the therapy I can't stay with them and they look to me and they're expecting my usual empathic response, I might have to say like, I'm sorry, I'm really can't, I'm struggling to hold that at the moment. You know, I'll say it in some way that they understand, like it's not going to be in technical jargon, but that to me would be an open way of like, that's kind of saying like, that's my limit at this moment with that content. And, you know, I don't see anything wrong with that. I'd then be like, I didn't do so well. I want to try and go and sort that out.
And one more thing, and I'll shut up. I don't want to take everybody's time. About the crying, and this is like, I'm going to admit to sins here. So part of my identity is self-psychology. So I'm pure non-directive therapist when I'm with patients, but when I need to make sense of something, this is where my intellectual stuff starts working. So in few years, I cried twice in therapy with patient, and I didn't like cry, I teared up. And what was interesting was what it happened with the people who were talking about excruciating things with absolutely blank emotional response. And I started tearing up and I couldn't help it. And of course I didn't like sob there, and I tried to do not bring attention to it, and it didn't bring attention, even though I'm sure the person noticed it, and it was two different people. But number one, it opened me to awareness of my vulnerability, my ability to do so, and that I struggled to actually accept what I can't discipline myself enough to do not do it. And number two, my self-psychology self was kind of normalizing it by saying you were feeling what that person was feeling together with that person, because it was quite deep into relationship, into the process. But you actually couldn't hold the tears. So it was normal response to the experience which you were sharing. So just as about crying, I think many things like disclosure in therapy and stuff like that, it's huge responsibility, because it's coming from the frame of reference of yours as therapist, and it's a way it's a door to understanding yourself as a person in a relationship. To me, this is how it is.
Yeah. Nice. I liked that story about you tearing up. That's nice. Okay, that's the end of my talk. I did want to say, Amalia, and remember we had a tete-a-tete earlier. Did you want to say anything else about that, or anything?
No, actually, I think I got the point of view from which you're saying it, and you said later, if I heard correctly, that you're a bit more. I don't know if it's exactly comfortable with children and adolescents. It's a bit different for you. So yeah, I understand the point of which you're looking at it. It's just for me, congruence is also about when I see it fit, and of course not as a priority, to share my feelings or thoughts with the client, if at the there and then I think, and I take the shot of it being fit.
Where did you get that idea from within person-centered theory?
Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's my issue. That's my problem, that is everywhere. And I think it's a misunderstanding of the theory.
Well, you said it yourself. You actually are more disclosing yourself with children and adolescents.
With those people, it has the expressed intent of saying that it's a different type of adult relationship, but it's not intended to influence the therapy, and it's often something I'll do before therapy really begins. So it's kind of like a, hi, my name's Andy, here's a bit about me.
Yeah, so it's kind of different for you. Like it helps you maybe build a more not intimate exactly, but a more human, let's say, relationship.
I think intimacy would be right as well. I think young people, when I self-disclose, they feel more able to self-disclose themselves, to bring themselves. Yeah. But so what you said reminded me of, there's a Rogers quote where it says, if I have a strong and persistent feeling, that I'll raise that. And I've heard that a lot. And I think people put a lot of weight on that. And I remember reading something recently, and it seemed pretty important that Rogers is saying that within a context of the whole work. And it seems unlikely that he was saying that he would just say how he felt in like a shooting from the hip. I don't know if that's making sense. I think I can be more direct with my question, Amalia. I think I would say, how do you know when it's the right time or thing to say? And yeah, what's your criteria for saying it?
Well, I'm not sure I can actually theoretically answer the question right now. I mean, it's all about the there and then, the relationship with the client, where this relationship is. It the beginning? Is it somewhere in the middle? It has to do with many things. I'm just saying it's not like it's excluded.
So I think you're saying like through the therapy, you might get to a point with someone where you feel more comfortable, and then you say, well, now I'm going to bring something of myself into this relationship because it's present.
I'm not sure about personal experience always related to what the client brings at the time. So not like
so like
irrelevant.
a response to it.
Yes.
I see.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Because like we can talk about this,
it is.
but unless I like saw like a snippet, I might go, "Oh, that's what I mean." You know, it's so much easier when you're in the room.
Yeah.
As a response, okay. Because this is where I was saying earlier, like I think with experience, if you're embodying the conditions, it doesn't matter what you say. Wow, that is such a brazen thing to say. I shouldn't have said it. Because obviously it does matter what you say. But I really do believe if all the conditions are there, whatever you say, the client's going to receive those conditions lovely. My only concern with that is it's an advanced thing and shouldn't be encouraged in training and can still be hard to know. Because I've read stuff by like well-known theorists and they do things and it's like they've rationalized it and they've gone, oh, you know, I was doing this, and it just doesn't seem that good. So,
are they just theorists, the one you're talking about, or are they also practitioners?
well, no, they're practitioners who also write articles, and like it's like, they get the theory. I'm sure a lot of their practice is good, but in some examples, they've just convinced themselves that it does fit the theory.
Yeah, but of course, as more people here said, maybe the timing wasn't actually correct when I thought I could share. So thankfully, then there's supervision, and there's my personal therapy too. So it's actually it's up to, it depends, and I keep on learning by experience.
I'm just going to check the chat because I think Katakali
Oh,
has said
right.
something.
I have something
Okay, she's got nice.
to share to say.
Yeah.
And you address your definition of congruence at the very beginning of this talk, and you put two parts. One is internal congruence. The other is relational congruence.
Yeah.
You said it's your definition of congruence. Do you think your definition of congruence is same to the congruence that Rogers defined?
It's a good question, and it's how I started the talk, where I really believe Rogers moved not only through definitions of congruence, but his theory was also evolving. So early stuff to later stuff is a bit different. It's too hard for me to say. It'd be like putting words in his mouth. I'm not sure.
So you're not sure if these two definitions are a little bit different. You're not sure.
Yeah, I suppose it would be useful if we could dig him up and say, what do you think of these definitions?
As I learned from my supervisor, and I just came to the original book of what he said. I think the congruence is, I with the help of the translation, it's all about the internal operation. It's realizing what is happening, what is going on in yourself moment by moment, and it's irrelevant to whether I'm acting congruence. So from my perspective, congruence is only the first part of your definition.
Okay. I get that, but I also think my second definition is pretty important to the therapy, because I would hope that what I'm offering the client is real.
Yeah, I understand you.
But I also would completely agree that the emphasis should be on number one, the internal congruence.
Yeah.
And I think the emphasis in recent times has moved towards the relational one, but also beyond into just self-disclosure. And I think that bits the mistake into self-disclosure.
Andy, can you do me a favor and provide your definitions, like your two definitions, just statement?
Yeah. Okay. I better go back to I'll just scroll on my phone. Here we go. There's two parts how I define congruence. God, it sounds like I'm making it up now. Right. The first one is internal and is knowing myself. The example I use is if I'm a bag of 100 marbles, then to be congruent would to know all 100 marbles. That's the first internal part. The second is relational. The client experiences my offering of the conditions as genuine.
So the difference is between the second part is you offering conditions,
Yes.
and the first part is you being congruent inside yourself, being real.
Yeah, and the first part is relevant in therapy because if my client says something that pisses me off, I need to know that that's what happens within me. And that's the first part, is that inner knowing. And then I hold that separately from offering them the conditions genuinely.
Oh, okay. So then condition. Okay, maybe it will help. So when I was in training very early in my career, the teachers was from Germany and Austria. So one of them offered something which came from his previous psychodynamic training. And he said, well, and this is what helps me sometimes. When you're in therapy, where your true self, like Tanya, who were a child, had history, she's there. Whereas another one is highly trained therapist who has theories and all that stuff, and there is another person observing, and there's you who does that therapy. So it's kind of trial, or you can think maybe it's Tanya who is sitting there. I don't know, but there's always like that observant person who can make a judgment if something is appropriate, inappropriate, or something like that. So when you kind of split it too, like you split the conditions from yourself.
So Tanya, I'm going to respond to that because I think it's a really important point. I've always thought that I want to practice my kind of therapy, and as much as possible I want to be myself in the room with people. But over time I've come to define that differently because I'm also wanting to offer a certain type of environment to my client. And there was a clash because I can't be fully myself and fully offer the conditions. It's impossible because my own frame of reference would prevent me. So when I'm with clients, as much as possible, I put my frame of reference aside and I try to enter their world. I'm not saying it in absolute terms because I think it fluctuates through the session, especially if they ask me questions. I come in with my frame of reference, for example. I don't feel it as a split anymore. I feel it as a focus.
I agree. This is how I function too, actually. It's just your definition splits it. Like how you just described it's united, but the definition splits it.
Yeah, this is the difficulty, the theory and the But because the theory, I'm trying to be as simple and clear as possible. So, but thanks for saying that because it helps. Yeah, talking about the theory is hard. Yeah. I want to check any questions from the group because it looks like one, maybe two people have just gone from there. You're on mute, by the way. How you getting on?
Yeah. Oh, did I have it? Oh, I was just going to say that when a client says something that might hurt my feelings or something that I try as best as possible to go to unconditional positive regard, and somehow that takes me away from the hurt. I'm back with the client. I just, because I'm not there for therapy. I'm there to help this person with therapy. So it really helps me. And I'll say to myself, I care about you. Even though what you said may have hurt me, I care about you. I care about you. And it just, in my mind, just for me, not for anyone else, it just helps me get over that and go on and not challenge the client, so to speak. I worry at times, but it helps me. I'd rather do that, I just think it's a nice fit. It's a nice way to take my mind away from what hurt me, because I am really not there for the therapy. I'm really not. I'm there, to help the client with the conditions in therapy. And the conditions can help you when you get stuck with one. Of course, we try as best as possible to use them all at the same time, of course, or what have you. But when I just know that in therapy, when a client says something that directly hurts me, it stays with me if I don't say to myself, you've said something, silently to myself, I'm hurt, but I care about you. I really care about you.
Yeah.
And it just kind of takes that away. Yeah. I don't know. It settles me. I don't know if that helps anybody else, but using that anyway. But sometimes people don't. Or what I mean is, we lose positive regard sometimes when we're hurt, just because it's natural. Like my big brother says something insulting to me, it hurts me, and I'm not sure why I'm saying my big brother, because in that situation I would probably say, "Fuck you," or whatever. Of course I wouldn't say that. So anyway, I was just saying the other conditions, such as UPR, can actually help you out of that, or has helped me in therapy to put that aside and not make that my issue with the client in the moment. And I think it works. It works very well for me. I could do that.
I really like that example, and thank you for sharing that. I think that's really nice.
Well, sure.
It's really nice. When I work with a lot of teenagers, some of them even say like, "Oh, I come here and I treat you like a punch bag." There's some people that wouldn't be able to tolerate that, and they'd want to say like, you shouldn't do that, but it's their therapy.
I've enjoyed this very much, actually.
Thank you.
Nice seminar.
I do have a question. So I'm not a practitioner, and I'm not studying high-intensity therapy. I just provide case management for the private counseling office that I work at. So I do interact with clients. I'm just wondering what it means to be to be genuine in this context, because I'm trying to understand like how you define genuine. When you are with your client, if you're always in the role of kind of being a therapist, then you always have to like kind of. It sounds like you have to consciously be checking yourself to make sure that you're focusing on your client exclusively. So I'm wondering how one can be genuine in that setting.
Yeah. So if you mean genuine in the sense of, am I being Andy? Am I just being myself? Then no, I'm not being genuine. I am being a therapist for this person.
Yeah, and then for the definition of what is the second part of the congruence definition? Because I know genuine was a part of it, and I was trying to follow along. I was a little confused.
So the second part is that the client experiences the conditions genuinely from me.
Oh, so the client perceives it to be genuine?
Yes, so that after a session, a client walks away and thinks, Andy really accepted me, or he really got where I am.
So as a therapist, so I'm just wondering, is it actually genuine, or like is the therapist being genuine when in therapy, or should the client just feel like that way, like they're understood?
So I am being genuine when I am empathizing with my client, when I'm accepting them, and I can feel often when I'm not, so when I slip. So it is genuine for me, but I'm not being genuinely Andy like I might be down the pub. And I think this is where it gets a bit complicated with the definitions, because genuineness and authenticity has really seen a resurgence in the last maybe 20 years in self-help and personal development, and is often a secret goal in many therapies to help the client be themselves, whatever that might mean. It's not my goal to be myself in therapy. I'm there to be their therapist.
Okay, I think I understand now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I wanted to kind of add too, like for me, after years of doing what I do, I really do honestly care and really do honestly want to understand. Like, so the conditions are very natural part of what it means to be in that role. When I'm coming there, I'm taking responsibility. I take on that role for that hour. I'm giving myself for that hour. And so, and this is kind of strange thing to say, but I strongly believe in it. If you really know the person, you cannot hate them. You cannot, like, there would not be violence and hate in the world if people would really meet. And so I meet my patients. I really listen, and I love them. This is something not for the, I care a lot. When I say love, I mean I care a lot because I know them, because I listen. So this is, but when conditions become natural, it's a natural expression of what it means for that hour to be me in therapist.
Nice. Pat's disappeared. She's gone. Ah. You're back, Pat. So I don't know if there's much more to be talked about this. Pat, you got anything else you wanted to say?
I do. I think what you brought up are extremely important topics for us to revisit no matter where we are. I'm currently retired, but working on getting a local license so I can do something with therapy. But I think it's an extremely important topic, and thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome. Yeah, it came about out of frustration, really. Yeah, and I think someone recently said to me, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to be an educator? And I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure. It's really difficult. I find for the last 2 days I was asking myself, why am I doing this talk? Who's it for? What's the point? I don't mean that like there's no point to it, but I was really trying to refine who's my audience, what am I trying to do here? Am I saying anything different? I think I'm not saying anything different, and I think that's the important part. I'm saying really basic, original theory. I think it's been strayed from and at the cost of the therapy. What I'm going to do, because there's something at 6, so we're probably going to wrap up soon. I mean, I don't mind hanging around if people want to talk. I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if anyone wants to email me abuse, you're welcome to do that. If I do that. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
So, because I was thinking, I don't know your name in the yellow jumper you spoke.
Oh, me? My name is Blake.
Blake. So Blake, what you can do if you want, if you email me, I can send you my notes for this. Because then I've got everything point by point, and it might help you understand bits or like to have it written down. And anyone can do this. I'll happily send you my brief notes for this if you want.
Thank you. Thank you.
We didn't record, did we?
So I have recorded it because they said I could, and I'm going to double check that's okay